MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin, former RNC chairman, and my co-host on our new MSNBC show, The Weekend, Michael Steele. Lisa, you and you hopped in the chair as this news broke yesterday. We've now had more than 24 hours to digest it. Help us understand the overall timeline for the Supreme Court's decision.
So the Supreme Court, Alicia, let's work backwards. The Supreme Court is going to hold oral argument on February 8th. And while that seems like a very compressed timeline, particularly by Supreme Court standards, you and I also know that a lot can happen between then and now, not only politically in that we have Iowa and New Hampshire prior to that, but legally as well. Between then and now, next week, Donald Trump will face the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, where he's going to press his claims of immunity against the federal election interference charges against him. The next week, he'll go back to court here in New York with E. Jean Carroll on his second defamation case brought by her against him. This time, she's seeking tens of millions of dollars. And so the Donald Trump who will appear at the Supreme Court on February 8th could be a Donald Trump who's not only weakened politically, but perhaps legally as well, and much more likely to face trial on those federal charges than he is right now today with that federal election interference case currently stayed.
So, Michael, you have Colorado Secretary of State saying voters are going to be the ones who protect our democracy, even if the Supreme Court does not. Take a listen.
No matter what happens, whether he's on the ballot or disqualified from the ballot, that's not the end of this saga. Democracy will not die because some court decision. Americans have all the power in the world at the ballot box next year. And I am so confident in the American voter, and I'm sure that we'll hold on to democracy past the next election.
Michael Steele, do you share that confidence?
I do, to a point. And the point is really around the idea of what Donald Trump is ultimately doing in this moment. He is steadily weakening the system from within. He is stress testing it at every turn possible, with all of these, appeals, last minute, out of the blue, around nothing, in some case seemingly knowing they probably won't win the challenge, but it slows the roll and it creates the lane for doubt and suspicion. In the end, two things can be true at once. We can go on and have this legal process unfold, as I think it should. And at the same time, rely ultimately on the voters who will go to the ballot boxes across the country in November to make their choice for president, whether Donald Trump is on that ballot or not. And so I think, this is part of the process that is difficult to really kind of get your head around, because you have so many things compressed in one instance going on at the same time. And the question is exactly how are folks sort of taking all of this in? That remains to be seen at the ballot box. But right now, what we do know is Donald Trump is trying his level best to weaken it enough so that create that doubt, so that one juror in some of these upcoming cases give him the pass that he seeks.
Well, Lisa, to that attack on institutions, Special Counsel Jack Smith, he's responded to Trump's filing seeking to hold him in contempt of court. How do you expect that power struggle between Trump and Smith to play out?
I don't expect Judge Chutkan to rule for contempt. I think it was a silly and perhaps even imprudent thing for Jack Smith to continue to file a motion in that case while the case is stayed. That having been said, it's certainly not worthy of contempt. And the motion that Trump filed asking Judge Chutkan to hold him and others in his office in contempt was borderline hysterical and done solely for political purposes, not for legal purposes. That motion is not going to be countenanced by that judge, but she was never the audience in the first place, Alicia.
Lisa, another headline that caught my eye, NBC reporting that Trump won't be able to use the, quote, idiot defense against his January 6 charges. Talk me through that.
Yeah, so a number of people, as our colleague Ryan Riley has noted in his reporting, as defendants in the January 6 cases have essentially said, I was a useful idiot. I was a pawn in Donald Trump's larger game. I did not understand what was going on that day or I felt that I was called by the president to come to Washington on January 6th, and that he was essentially excusing, if not directly calling for, all the things that went down that day, including the violence. Trump himself obviously can't say that because he is the disinformer in chief. He is the person on whom these useful idiots were preyed, essentially. So in his case, he can't use that defense. But I want to point out, Alicia, to you and our viewers, that there is a close cousin of that argument that the former president might be able to avail himself of, and that is the advice of counsel defense. Donald Trump was scheduled to have to tell Judge Chutkan and Jack Smith's office later this month whether he will advance a defense that he was solely relying on the advice provided to him by certain of his lawyers. And if he chooses that defense, that is essentially like saying, in good faith, I had lawyers telling me I had a chance here and that there was something to the John Eastman, Ken Chesebro arguments about Mike Pence and his power under the Constitution. I did not willfully, flagrantly violate federal statutes. There might be something there, and we'll have to wait and see.
Lisa Rubin, my friend, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us on what is our last show day. Michael Steele, you are sticking with me next. The stakes of the court's decision in sharp focus with the Iowa caucuses right around